Call to order, regular meeting, Thursday, November 7, 2019. Invocation and Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. McMillan.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the grace you pour out upon us. We just ask a special blessing over this meeting tonight. Give us wisdom, Lord. We ask a special blessing over the United States, state of Louisiana, and this parish, and the city of Lake Charles, and all the other cities throughout Calcasieu Parish. We just ask you watch over us as we go to and from the meeting today. We ask this in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Everybody please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Little reminder to please silence all phones, and if you need to speak on an item on the agenda, fill out the blue slip in the back and bring it up front to Ms. Jessica. Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Kathy.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Abshire?
Here.
Mr. Angelpont?
Here.
Mr. Barris?
Here.
Mr. Brain?
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Mr. Farnham?
Here.
Mr. Guidry?
Here.
Mr. Guillory?
Oh, here.
Mr. Landry? Mr. Latour?
Here.
Vice President McMillan? Mr. Scott is at a NACO Coastal Steering Committee today, unable to attend. Mr. Senegal?
Here.
Mrs. Trimmy?
Here.
And President Mayo.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kathy. Number 4, take appropriate action on applications for liquor and beer permits.
Second.
Mr. Crane.
Madam President, we have 75 applications before you tonight and ask that they be approved. They're
have
all
a motion?
renewals.
I have a motion. Move. I have a motion by Mr. Entrepont and a second by Mr. Collins. Any discussion? Mr. Bears.
75, that's got to be some kind of record,
That's
huh?
gotta be a record.
I don't think so. I think we probably have more. It's renewal time though, so
Oh,
they're all coming.
okay. Like, what am I missing out on? Because I don't have any invitations to anything. Thank you, Ms. Mayo.
Any other discussion? Any objections? Motion carries. Number 5, consideration of
Move on
approving
5.
payment of all
Second.
current
Second.
invoices. I have a motion by Mr. Entrepont and a second by Mr. Latour. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 6, consideration of approving the minutes of the regular
Second.
meeting of the police jury dated October 3rd, 2019. I have a motion by Mr. Farnham and a second by Mr. Bears. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 7, consideration of approving the Public Works Committee report dated October 31st, 2019. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Madam President. Public Works Committee meeting dated October 31st, 2019. Item A, approve the following request. Presentation by Mr. Stephen Whitfield. Appearance by Mr. Jim Rock. Approving the following amendments to professional engineering contracts. Neil Schaefer Incorporated, Ham Reed Road at Lake Street Intersection Improvement Project. C.W. Fenstermaker and Associates, LLC, for the Red Davis McAllister Road and South Park Drive Roundabout Project. Lawson Engineering for Johnny Bro Road Extension Project in Ward 7. Item 4, approving the following professional engineering contracts. O'Quinn and Associates for Alta Road Bridge Replacement Project in Ward 2. O'Quinn and Associates for Bigwood Stark Road Bridge Replacement in Ward 5. Item 5, approving expropriation of property for SVK LLC for Ham Reed Road Extension in Ward 3. Authorizing parish engineer to advertise. Item 6, authorizing parish engineer to advertise for Newcomer Road Bridge Replacement Project. Item 7, accepting the following projects in Calcasieu Parish as substantially complete. I-10 North Frontage Road, Phase 1 West Sabine River Diversion Canal to Ruth Street, Ward 4. And Johnny Bro Road, West Calcasieu Bridge Replacement in Ward 7. Item 8, accept the Audubon Trace, Phase 1 subdivision located off of Terrio Road in Ward 1. That's my report. I make a motion to accept the report.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan in all bullets and a second by Mr. Fordham. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 8, consideration of approving the Agenda Committee report dated October 31st, 2019. I have a motion by Mr. Abshire and a second by Mr. Guillory. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 9, consideration of adopting a resolution amending portions of the police jurors' operational policies manual to include job descriptions for police jury president and vice president.
So move.
I have a motion by Mr. Latour, second by Mr. Guillory.
I got a question.
Mr. Guillory.
Yes, I was just, are we amending or changing the rules, and when was this done? And
Mr. Gary, this actually has been talked about with some of the jurors or from the jurors going back really early this year. We've never had a formal job description for the president's position and vice president, and it's enough of a set of things that we felt like we needed to just write them down. So there's not a lot of new things, but we put it in writing to make it easier to understand for anybody who serves in that position. And part of the fact that there will be a pretty large turnover of jurors, that was another reason, because a lot of that was just verbally done. So this is actually the first time it's been in writing, but it's just a lot of the same things, but it's not just verbally passed on.
I just think with more than half of the jury coming on, that we're making a decision before they even get here. I know we did something for Shayla, we did till January, but I think we're just making a decision
Well,
for a lot of the guys that's not, because they're gonna wanna run for president themselves.
Well, when you look at the duties in the description, y'all have a good understanding because of your experience in what is included. That's why we felt like we needed to do it this year. It doesn't get in the way of anybody running for president, if that's what you mean. It just talks about how you need to preside at meetings, represent the jury at ribbon cuttings or economic announcements. A lot of those little things have added up. It's a more complex job than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago. So
Okay, and it's
we felt it was honestly appropriate that the sitting jury approve it. I think because you just know the ins and outs. Many of you have served in that role.
and is it also like trying to get the president to stay for 2 years, 2 terms, or?
As per what I sent all of you, and this, we had talked to several jurors to get a good feel for this. It is, the only change there, Tony, is that like it always has been, the president and vice president would serve a 1-year term, but now it would allow, if the whole jury votes for those offices, to serve 1 successive term. It doesn't mean it's a 2-year term. It says if you choose, the jury can vote that person a 2nd term. It's optional. So that is new. That part is new, yes.
Okay, all right then, thank you.
Mr. Bears.
I'm good.
Good job, guys. That's all I have to say.
Any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 10, consideration of
10.
adopting a resolution amending employment agreement between the police jury and Brian C. Beam, appointing him as ex officio parish secretary. I have a motion by Mr. Collins and a second by Mr. Abshire. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 11, consideration of adopting a resolution in support of the U.S. congressional delegation's efforts to further secure funding for hurricane protection and coastal restoration from the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act. I have a motion by Ms. Trimmon and a second by Mr. Landry. Mr. Farnum.
Thank you, Madam President. Could you give us a quick little rundown of some highlights of this so that the public will kind of know what we're talking about here?
Sure, Les. Many of you have heard the term Go Mesa, and as it's stated on there, the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act. A summary of that is that for a few years now, the federal government gets proceeds from oil and gas offshore, production offshore. And several coastal states that are on the Gulf of Mexico get these funds. It's actually been at like $375 million annually. And the idea is to protect the coast. A lot of that goes on off the coast, and it's needed. This particular effort, which in Louisiana, Senator Cassidy's involved with some other senators from other coastal states, to try to increase the revenue share of that, because like anything else at the federal level, there's efforts to try to use it for other things besides coastal protection and restoration. So this is to head that off and secure the monies and maybe even get a better percentage. And so you've got Senate and U.S. Senate and House legislation very much identical to try to stem some of the efforts to pull away from that. So this is simply your action tonight would support those efforts of the federal delegation from the coastal states to secure those funds better.
Thank you. I read.
Any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 12, consideration of adopting ordinance amending in Chapter 26 pertaining to small cell wireless facilities ordinances. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 13, consideration of adopting a resolution to be submitted to the Louisiana Office of Community Development Disaster Recovery Unit for the 901 Lakeshore Drive building window hardening for floors 2 through 11 project. I have a motion by Mr. Fordham and a second by Mr. Latour. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 14, consideration of adopting resolution regarding the following requests. A, authorizing the submittal of a local government assistance program grant application on behalf of special service districts. B, execution of an agreement with the Louisiana Office of Community Development for said grant awards. And C, execution of
14
subrecipient
all
agreements with said special service districts. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan and all bullets, and a second by Mr. Collins. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 15, consideration of adopting
Move on 15,
resolution
all
regarding the
votes.
following requests.
Second.
A, authorizing the submittal of a Community Water Enrichment Fund grant application on behalf of special service districts. B, execution of an agreement with the Louisiana Office of Community Development. And C, execution of subrecipient agreements with said special service districts. I have a motion by Mr. Fordham and a second by Mr. Latour, all bullets. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 16, consideration of
16.
adopting a resolution authorizing the submittal of a grant application to the Louisiana Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness for the 2019 Flood Mitigation Assistance Grant Program. I have a motion by Ms. Trimmin and a second by Mr. Brain. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 17, consideration of adopting an ordinance rescinding ordinance number
Move on 17.
7234 being redeemed due to the adjudicated property being redeemed. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Mr. Fordham. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 18, consideration of adopted ordinances allowing for disposition of the police jurors' interest in and donation to the City of Lake Charles for each of the following adjudicated properties. A, 2209 Channel Street. B, 507 Boston Street. C, 650 Boston Street. D, 1615 Malcolm Street. E, corner of Channel Street and North First Avenue. And F, 1617 C Street. I have a motion by Mr. Fordham and all bullets, and a second by Mr. Collins.
To me and Chris.
Mr. Guillory.
I was just gonna ask on the corner lot, because I know that was one of always the corner lots we was trying to save on the corner lots, especially for the drainage and everything. Is that one of the corner lots that's available for this or no?
Mr. Guillory, it is. We've looked at it. In fact, myself and Mr. Wainwright, we looked at that, and it doesn't appear that it's something that we would want to keep
Okay,
on that particular corner.
all right,
so.
thank you, thank you.
Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Madam President. You know, we kind of had this policy change now for months, and I have a hard time believing that there's not one piece of property that's in a flood zone.
These
I
particular
mean,
ones-
these may not be, but just think of how many we've had like the last 2 years. I mean, none of them have been in a flood zone?
Not these here. there's a small portion on that corner lot that is in a flood zone, but it's not very often, you know. And I've let Mr. Wainwright look at it too, so.
If I can, I'll comment on the flood zone part of it.
Go
This
ahead.
particular lot. So this is in a system that is pumped, where this location is at. So there's actually a set of pumps that pump this area. So from a FEMA standpoint, because those pumps are not automated, you don't get credit for the pumping in terms of floodplain mapping. So while it's mapped as a floodplain, when the pumps are operating, it's not really a floodplain. So this is just a detail down inside of FEMA's regulations that won't let it. If they would acknowledge the pump systems, this wouldn't be in the floodplain. So, and again, when you look at the elevations of these lots relative to the floodplain that's there, it's really not a lot that we would be looking at to keep and protect the floodplain and some things that we've talked about. So, again, this is a pump system. It's just got a little piece of it that is touching the mapped floodplain, but I would feel like it's really not an accurate mapping in this case.
And I'm sure none of these are very big, I guess. They're all small lots.
Most of them are.
Yeah, most of them are.
Thank you.
Warner?
Thank you, Madam President. So I guess technically they are in a floodplain, because you don't get credit for it?
Just
So
that one.
how many of the ones that we talked about in the past have been in this same situation?
I don't know if all of them are in that same situation that Mr. Wainwright.
This is a classic Dennis question that he asks every single time we have this, and Mr. Landry beat me to the punch on it. But you know, I guess that's what Dennis was getting at on all these questions is, do we want to do this? Do we really want to continue to do this if somewhere along the line this is all ultimately going to be in the floodplain?
Not all of these properties are in the floodplain. That's what
Some
we're
of them
saying. Some of them are, but in this particular group, this one property on E, there's a very small portion that's in it, and it's in the pumped area.
Just one of these.
Yes.
One of these, and maybe one or two spotty things that we've done in the past have been
Yes.
there. I know all of these aren't next door to each other,
No,
so
they're
it's
not.
not likely they're all gonna be in
They're
the
not.
same category. Okay, thank you.
Landry?
Thank you, Madam President. One more question following something that you said about the pumps being automated. So if they're automated, then you get credit for it, and if they're not, you don't?
Yes, sir. This is just a little subtlety that's inside FEMA's operation. I think this is in the old mapping area. So remember, these maps we're looking at are old and outdated. So they had really no good way of knowing or even modeling back when the original maps and things were done. So they just took a position in their mapping processes that unless they had absolute proof that it was automated and set up in a way that they approved, then they just sort of didn't count on it as a floodplain management tool. So, in essence, there's some areas of our here that are mapped that when this changes in the remapping efforts, that will probably come out of some floodplains. So it's just something that I've only learned recently myself in attending some conferences and things that this is out there. Yet another reason why the maps are just not accurate. And that's what they're trying to change.
Well, I would suggest that we get with the drainage board and let's make sure that it's done, every I's dotted and every T's crossed, and let's do it exactly like it should be done. Then that way you get the credit from FEMA. Because I can tell you, I actually own a piece of property that's in this area where these pumping, the property hadn't flooded in 80 years. And you still got to buy flood insurance, and it keeps going up every year. It's very expensive. But if that's happening to me, that has to be happening to a whole lot of folks out there. So why can't we, why don't we try, see if we can't do that to give them some relief?
We're definitely pushing on that front. We agree. Like I said, just something we really kind of figured out not too long ago. And, you know, getting things remapped and more accurate is everyone's goal. That's FEMA's goal too at this point. They are beginning to address all this nationwide, not just here in Lake Charles.
Just tell them to start with you.
Yes, sir.
Well, keep in mind, these properties are inside the city of Lake Charles.
Oh, I know. I
So
understand.
I just, they would have to
They would probably
instigate that.
not have too much of a problem with us helping them out, I wouldn't think. If we're saving the citizens of their great city some money, I think they would be happy. That gets people excited if you save them money. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 19, take appropriate action on the
Move on
following
19, all
bids
bullets.
received by the parish purchasing agent.
Second.
A, 3 or newer jet vac trucks for use by the Division of Engineering and Public Works. After a review of the bids, the staff recommends rejecting all bids due to budgetary constraints and requests permissions to re-advertise for bids. B, bulk all with unit prices effective from November 8th, 2019 until October 31st, 2020. The staff recommends the respective low responsible and responsive bids of Bro Petroleum Products Incorporated, Lord Oil Company of Acadiana, and Reladine Pompelli Oil Acquisition to be accepted. C, clearing and snagging of Bayou Arsene lateral BA-L47 Jefferson Davis Parish line to Hardy Road. The staff recommends that the low responsive and responsible base bid without alternates in amount of $207,559 of Grillet, $599 of Grillet Construction LLC be accepted. I have a motion by Mr. Latour and all bullets, and a second by Mr. Bears. Mr. Andrepont.
Thank you, Madam President. The issue on the vac trucks, the bids came in so high that we had to reject all of them?
Well, they came in over our budget that we were had prepared. The low bidder was rejected based on not submitting some proper documentation. So the actual next bidder, the next low bidder, was $80,000 over on the total. And because of just some various things inside this bidding process on warranties and some other things, we've decided to kind of go back to the drawing board, redraw the specs, and bid one more time.
Well, two things. Number one, the budget can be amended, and number two, I don't think you're gonna get them any cheaper than you are now. That's my opinion. And I rest my case and I yield back.
Landry.
Thank you, Madam President. On C, does that lateral flow into Jeff Davis?
Yes,
So it flows into Calcasieu?
yes, sir.
Okay. Because just for clarification, if they're flowing into Jeff Davis Parish, we're going to reach out to them to try to get them to help us and do a joint project. Because if we clean it to the line and it's going their way and they don't do anything, it's not going to do us any good.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Bears.
Thank you. That being said, they can keep it as is for now, since it's coming to us. The two bids on the snagging project, they're $300,000 difference. I mean, are we sure that this company's? I mean, that's a pretty intense project in that you have to have some specialized equipment to get in there and get the debris out. So, can you maybe shed some light on, make sure these cats are?
Yes, sir. Actually, we did make calls, saw the numbers ourselves. This company is actually very experienced at doing this type of work. That they're very much firm on their bid. They had offered no changes and no regrets, so they feel like they can do the job. And when we talked to the other company, they had a bust in their bid based on an interpretation. So their number would have been a lot closer to this number had they caught that one thing. So in reality, we think we actually got outside of that bunch, two really good bids, and we got a really good company to do this type of work.
Are they local?
I think they're out of Baton Rouge is where they've primarily worked.
But they're a specialty, that's kind of,
This is
kind
this
of
is right
their
in their yeah.
wheelhouse? Okay.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Madam President.
Fordham.
Thank you. How many miles of lateral is this?
I'm gonna see. I think Byron's here with Byron, so maybe
Okay.
he knows that off the top of his head.
2 miles?
About 2 miles.
How many miles of lateral remain behind this? Or is this the beginning to the end of the lateral?
Well,
Maybe Byron wants to come up to the microphone. It looks like he does.
if he has these hard answers, he can sure come.
You going too?
About to run up there.
Name and address for the record, please.
Byron Rockeye, Myron Associates, 600 North City Service
So
Highway.
does this take it from the beginning of our responsibility to the end of our responsibility, or is there still more to be done?
Correct. The original limit was Jeff Davis Parish Line all the way to Hardy Road, which is near Cauchy River. This current phase covers from Jeff Davis Parish Line to about Hecker Road. And that's 2 of the 4 miles that we're covering, so.
So, we're starting on the very upstream
Yes,
end
sir.
of it. Okay.
To where your limitations are.
All right, so we got another phase of this coming up soon?
Have one planned, yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Bears.
Thank you. Is this the part that had the beaver dams?
Yes, sir.
The big
Yes, sir.
60-foot deep? So this is, all right, so this is gonna be this is the big one.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Any other discussion? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any objection? Motion carries. Number 20.
Move on
Move on
20.
Take appropriate action on the
Look, he
terms of the
moves, I
following
second.
members of various
One by one.
boards and districts.
Take it one by one.
Take them one by one.
A, Calcasieu Parish Planning and Zoning Board, Ms. Sharon Galicia.
Move on 20.
I have a motion.
Move to
Have
reappoint.
Mr. Senegal to reappoint Ms. Sharon Galicia and a second by Mr. Latour. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. B,
So I move
Waterworks
on
District
B.
Number 7 Awards 4 and 6.
Second.
Mr. Adrian Brock Peterson. I have a motion by Ms. Trimmin to reappoint Mr. Adrian Brock Peterson and a second by Mr. Senegal. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. C, Workforce Development Boards. 1, Ms. Tracy
I'd like
Fontenot.
to move to defer for 30 days.
I have a motion by Mr. Latour to defer for 30 days and a second by Mr. Guillory. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Number 2, Mr. Tab
I'd like
Finch.
to move to
Fincham.
appoint Mr. Raymond Campbell.
I have a motion by Mr. Latour to
Second.
appoint Mr. Raymond Daniel Campbell and a second by Mr. Bears. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. 3, appoint Ms.
I'd like to
Janelle
appoint Ms. Janelle
Johnson.
Johnson.
I have a
Second.
motion by Mr. Latour to appoint Ms. Janelle Johnson and a second by Mr. Abshire. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. I have a point of personal privilege, Mr. McMillan.
Real quickly, Randy Burley's in the audience tonight. I'd like to congratulate him on winning District 14. He's going to be the person that will be taking my place in District 14. Randy, welcome. We're glad to have you. Thank you.
The motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
A motion by Mr.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Abshire, second by Mr. McMillan.
I heard you joke today and I thought about you.